50, 25, 25?
I think
verbal is probably about 15 to 20.
15 to 20?
10, 10, and 80.
10, 10, 80? Verbal is actually 7% of your total communication, which is why you see a lot of different kind of social media or emails or different things like that that are really good instigators into conflict or different issues. 38%, I think. Yeah, 38% is the paraverbal, so your tone, volume, your cadence.
So you break down paraverbal.
Yeah, so well, it makes up tone, volume, cadence, kind of how you're saying what you're saying, basically. I don't know if we have any math people, but 55%, that means that is nonverbal. So how you're saying what you're saying, the body language behind it, how you approach the situation. I mean, if you're running up to somebody, I mean that already sets the tone, right? As opposed to sauntering up to somebody. So it's important to know this, just because when we're going into difficult conversation or situations, it's important to know kind of the makeup of that communication. I mean, we spend a lot of time on making sure that we have the right words kind of put in place so that the other person can hear them. But we often forget about the presentation of that, right? This is why, I mean, we have, we're good BS readers that way, right? Because it's just the way we kind of encode information. So it can dramatically or drastically affect the message that we're portraying. We all make assumptions. Oftentimes, I mean, even if we look around at the drawing of conflict, we automatically jump to that negative kind of thinking, right? We automatically assume the worst intent when the effect on us is felt as negative. So someone says something nasty to me, I automatically assume that their intent was to harm me or hurt me. We automatically assume the effect that we're casting on to the other person is based on what our intent was. So if we make a nice comment about somebody's hair and they take it as a negative comment of what's wrong with my hair, we automatically assume that it was well received, that compliment. Right? But it's not too often that we kind of check in on what that kind of action or that final effect was. So as long as intent and effect are private, or they stay private, we're kind of concocting this cocktail of miscommunication. So this is the intent, action, effect model. Okay? So as you can see, in the public realm here, the only thing that's public is the action that's been taken. So whether those are words, whether that's some other type of action, nonverbal action, or anything in that kind of communication realm, that's the only thing that's really public. The other two things are intent and effect, right? So the intent of the person saying or doing that action, and the effect of the person receiving that action. So, for example, last summer I was playing volleyball, and I was playing with my brother-in-law, and every time I would miss a play or I would, not do so well, and then it was my time to serve, every single time he would say, just put the ball in, just put the ball in. What do you think the effect was on that? I automatically assumed, well, I can't say that here, but but thanks a lot, what's your problem? Of course I'm going to put the ball in. I messed up this one time. I'm going to put the ball in, don't worry about it. But really, I mean, if I was actually paying attention, I would have noticed he said that every single time somebody served. Regardless of whether we got the point or didn't get the point, right? So we automatically assume the intent of the other person based on the effect that we've had with it. So as long as we keep that as long as we keep intent and effect in the private, I mean, the chances of miscommunication, this is where a majority, I would say probably 98%, which is a true stat that I just made up. I forget where I was going with that. So at least some of these common communication challenges, right? We assume intent based on the effect and effect based on intent. So how can we, kind of jump past this common challenge that we have with communication? We tend to generalize rather than name specific actions, especially when we're dealing around intent and effect. We tend to generalize that. So if we're talking about, let's say a music situation, for example, right? With, as it was termed, traditional versus electric guitar versus organ, okay? If we assume, if we talk about, generally, then we're really not accomplishing anything. Is it that we're not doing contemporary music, or we're doing hymns, or we're doing psalms, or all these different things. If we talk about in generalities of, let's say, electric guitar versus organ, right? Are we talking about styles of music then? I mean, there's a lot of different gray areas in there. So the more specific we're able to get, a lot of times the better we are, because then we can deal with that specific instance or specific example. We avoid asking about intent or effect. Sometimes just because we don't want to know. We don't want to know what the effect was, or we don't want to know what their intent is, because we're more than comfortable just assuming it, and we don't want to be wrong, right? We avoid imagining neutral and or positive intent on the part of the other. So if you read kind of what was sent out earlier this week, just around vacuuming, we automatically assume the negative, right? When realistically, I mean, it's very likely that it's something that's neutral or something that's positive, right? Not kind of bashing over the head with a vacuum cleaner kind of stuff. We assume I'm very drastic. We assume that we have all the information we need to make a decision regarding what's happened. And this is actually really, really big, especially when we're dealing in any situation, all right? That we assume that we have all the information. We assume we know what the problem is, but we haven't actually listened to the person to find out what their intent was behind everything, or what's actually the problem for them. We just kind of assume the problem on them. So there's some ideas for communicating using this intent, action, effect model, okay? Because what we need to do is take the intent and take the effect from the private, and we need to bring it into the public. We need to bring it into that public sphere so that we can know what we're dealing with, and we can be transparent with what we're dealing with, and we can avoid this miscommunication that's happening. So some of the different ideas on how we can use that, bring that intent or that effect into the public, is my intent with this conversation. Actually name it, right? My intent with this conversation, right off the get-go, this is my intent for sitting down and having this difficult conversation with you. I'm really upset that you think I don't vacuum enough, whatever the case may be, right? Whether it's a small issue, whether it's a large issue. By bringing your intent out right away at the beginning of that conversation, at least you're kind of laying your cards out on the table that way, right? And that's something to constantly revisit as well. Throughout that conversation about what your intent is, or what's the effect on you when I'm saying this or that. A classic one is, I feel X when, Y, because of this. Right? So when you said that to me, I felt sad, or I felt frustrated that you said, just put the ball in.